listeners. This program is sponsored by Sue Minahan.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for soul growth. Come journey with us through astrology's energetic cycles and get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, I'm Sue Minahan, and this is Talk Cosmos. Today is August 11th. We're looking ahead at some amazing transits that will last for a good while. The impact is going to be substantial. And this is Planet Buzz. I'm not going to say much more except to say that we're ready for Planet Buzz. We have a heap to tell you about.
Focusing on perspectives of pattern planet cycle relationships and understanding their archetypal energy consciousness, reflecting through history, current events, mythology, and philosophical questions, these are the members of Planet Buzz.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, founder of Talk Cosmos since 2018. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, consultant, speaker, writer, vibrational astrology student, Dwarf Planet University graduate, Kepler Astrology Toastmasters Club charter member. I have a fine arts music degree plus a certificate in jazz. I'm an artist, musician, and certified color energy life coach. Especially, I love mythology and esoteric philosophies.
And I'm Dr. Laura Todd. I work as a spiritually oriented psychological astrologer with students and clients around the world. As a counselor, writer, and educator, I love helping people recognize their inner strengths, take advantage of auspicious moments, and navigate times of challenge with greater ease. On my own podcast, Mythic Sky Storytime, I discuss astrology, mythology, and actualizing our full potential. Learn more at mythicsky.com.
Plus, a special guest who we will introduce in just a short moment.
And as the ancient Hermetic code reveals,
as below, so above. As above, so below.
Oh, I love that new reminder that we do have a special guest. And I want to remind people too, it's activating regulated growth. That's going to be our theme for today. And we have Norma Jean Ream of Kalapana, Seaview, Hawaii, along with Laura and myself. Hi, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoy being here.
It's our mutual pleasure. Norma Jean is a professional astrologer, consultant, a mundane astrologer, writer, and organizer. She was in the first class of Kepler College, receiving her Bachelor of Arts in Astrological Studies, East and West. And she has the esteemed certification of NCGR Level 4, which is the highest you can get. She has a specialty in traditional Western astrology. She writes, rather. I'm jumping ahead because Norma Jean did write a course and teach it for 7 years about traditional astrology for IAA, which is an international institution. It's now shifted gears. It's expanding in larger directions itself. And Norma Jean writes some mundane articles on her website. So that's at Astrology Hawaii, because she too is here on the island with me on the other side where it's raining. Here I have clear skies. And she does electional timing, relocation, horary children's charts for parents. And she also hosted a pilot podcast, Sirius Star Talk. So welcome.
Thank you.
So glad to have you.
Happy to be
here. And Laura, Dr. Tad's bio, although you heard it, you can read that ahead. We are talking about 3 planets, spotlighting those. It's going to be Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. Actually, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And this is where they are in the wonderful universe of ours. A little bit we're going to look at 2 sides of these planets. We're going to look at the mundane in a moment, but just to give some kind of grounding a little bit, Mars is the same as Eris. One is Roman and one is Greek. Roman took all the Greek names and shifted the names, but kept pretty much the same identity. The god of war and agriculture, protector of Rome. And Jupiter, who was the king of the gods, you could say, of law and order, of justice, is of growth and potential, whereas Mars, let's think of it as action. Everything about action. It's our drive. And that drive can be for causes and defenses.
Well, and that's part of his myth too, right? So particularly as Eris, that we think of him as the god of war, but he was really the god of the quest. Athena was the goddess of war, and she'd tell Eris where to go, right? So there's this questing energy, this seeking energy that Mars has of that propulsion forward energy that we really associate with Mars, is that questing energy.
Thank you.
As well.
That really speaks well. It defines it. I like that. I wrote it down. I'm going to remember this. Good point. Saturn, the timekeeper, until 1781, when Uranus was discovered, and it still keeps this heritage of being the furthest planet that we can see with the naked eye. Some say that you can see Uranus once in a blue moon, once at an age in November, but generally speaking, Saturn holds that ranking position, and it is the boundary line. It's a timekeeper of endings and beginnings, cycles. So these two are what we are really looking at, the expansion and the contraction. There's going to be two sets. Mars conjuncts Jupiter. These are the dates. And I know we have a podcast, so that I will just mention that briefly. On the 14th of August, Mars conjuncts Jupiter at 16 degrees Gemini. And the first waxing opening square phase is a crisis in consciousness. And 5 days later, on the 19th of August, it will be at 17 degrees Gemini, square Saturn is 17 Pisces. And then at Christmas Eve, it happens again at 14 degrees, respectively in Gemini and Pisces. And then next year, when everything is shifting gears, and we're going to get that to the very end, we trust our cycle is right here, if we can gauge our timing, Jupiter and Saturn square again, but will be in Cancer and Aries. So the dynamics are continually changing. Norma Jean is a mundane astrologer, as we noted, and kindly has made slides. We're going to use Mars and Jupiter first because that's the first conjunction. Go ahead.
In mundane astrology, we look at planets a little differently than in natal astrology work. Mars rules things like the armed forces and law enforcement, and in general, the military industrial complex. It also represents the blue collar or middle class and the construction industries and skilled trades, and the military prowess in the world and foreign policy. And it rules the gun and ammunition industry, warfare, and military operations. And Jupiter is the planet that rules national sovereignty, also imperialism, and our quality, and we see in America, being the world's big brother. Jupiter has to do with the social glue based on common values and belief systems. It represents the social welfare and the nation's well-being. It also is about the laws to enforce justice through social institutions that govern behavior. And the Supreme Court is the ultimate authority. And universities also, philanthropy, and the 1%.
It's most fascinating, Supreme Court, because Jupiter is law. And yes, that's such a potent time here. And Laura, if you had comments you wanted to make, I don't mean to skip over if you have
I think the thoughts I've had make more sense once we get to Saturn in terms of some of the
Here we go.
Planets will all be in communication with each other is the language, how I'm explaining aspects to clients these days. It's the nature of the conversation that the planets are having with each other.
That's right.
So
yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah, once we get into that, I think.
Okay. Immediately in 3 days from now, we have Mars conjunct Jupiter. Last month it was conjunct Uranus. And we know a lot happened after that new moon, full moon in Cancer. And now we're in the season of Leo. And it'll be at 16, right about in the little past the middle of in the second decan. So it's 16 degrees Gemini. And for the timing for our podcast people, it's 11 a.m. It's 11:21 a.m. And they add 31 seconds. So that's the details. It's a powerful, in its own right, it's powerful. And it's important to know because Mars remains in orb with Jupiter. So essentially, although we're focusing on Jupiter square Saturn, rightfully so, because this is since the 2020 conjunction, which we'll go into a little bit later too. Mars is on board, and she energies are really propelling a lot of action. And it's in a great T-square, meaning that's more action with our emotional philosophies, you could say, and our directions that we're going. But perhaps we should talk about that yod with Mercury.
I mean, there's so much in this chart, like I don't even know. I mean, I think the Mercury gets, in addition to there being a yod going on, Mercury is governing this conjunction, right? Because it's happening in Gemini. So you can't ignore that Mercury, because the Gemini piece, right? I mean, in some ways, I'm so glad if we're going to have this alignment that it's happening with Mars and Gemini, because right? Gemini governing communication, governing language, that there may be some truth that comes out, particularly with that opposition then to the moon, that Sag loving truth, right? A seeker of truth, right? And so we get this theme showing up around what is going to be revealed, Emperor having no clothes, what stories are we're already seeing that, right? Stories being told or lies being uncovered is actively happening in the news. And I think, these larger transits tend to announce themselves, right? That it's not just on the day that it perfects, that it happens, that there is a lead-in to it. And I think we're already seeing that in spades in the news. And there's likely more communication, more stories, more language coming out that brings that interaction with Saturn, even though it isn't perfected on the 14th, of accountability and what's illusion, right? And with it in Pisces. And
yes.
And again, that idea of like the Emperor having no clothes and that being revealed.
Yeah. And so to feed off of that with Mercury, I want to point out Mercury is making its pass through this 0 Virgo point 3 times. And also Venus and the Sun cross that point, all 3 telling the story of the Pluto-Neptune sextile, making that yod. And it's like we have to understand what has happened and what stories are being told and sort out a lot of details. And Jupiter, by traditional rulership, rules both Sagittarius and Pisces. And so Jupiter and Mars are having a powwow about what are these issues that are coming up from the past and what's real justice, what's the proper rule of law. So we have some very interesting dialogue, as you say, going on.
You also brought up in a other conversation, Norma Jean, that Mercury, because it goes back to 17 degrees, no, 21. Not 17, 21 degrees Leo, but that 17 degrees, what was this that you were saying about Kamala? Oh, it was.
Kamala's Mars is 21 Leo. and her ascendant is 24 Gemini. So Mars will cross her ascendant on the 28th as Mercury turns stationary direct. And this is more of the story to play out after this Democratic convention.
And also you brought up the fact that Trump was officially given the Republican nomination when it was at 21 degrees
Leo.
Yes. So the
on
plot
July 17th. That's right. That's when the 17 was.
Yeah. So it'll be a powerful time. It's a big kickoff, like a power keg. That's and I love that idea that they're negotiating here, and both facts that is Squre, again, that seeking energy. So more information helps build the right belief system. It tears it down, it rebuilds it.
And we have two stories going on. We've got the Democrat, Republican, and two big stories about the
duality.
People.
There you go.
Duality.
It's Gemini. That can be representing duality in that case. Although, well, let's go on to the next chart. We're okay with that, both of you? Okay.
Sure.
I noticed that there were these really strong action, and we've covered part of it. There is that Thor's hammer, which is sesquiquadrate 135 degrees, which is a square and a half extra action orientation. And Pluto, let's see, what is it? Oh, and then there's also other sesquiquadrates, Pluto and Mars in that conjunction there that they're having. Mars and Mars. So transformation is not always immediately on the table. There's a lot going where you've got to struggle, adjustment going this way, that way to really work that out. It's something that's commanding. Tell me if I skipped by something and you wanted to say something more, but I think we covered that pretty well. Okay. So we have more mundane slides. These are for the outer planets. We did Mars and Jupiter. And if you have anything more you want to say about those, either one of you, and then Norma Jean also made some charts, which I dressed up a little bit, and I thank her very much for that support. Go ahead.
All right. So in mundane and business astrology, Saturn is the planet of business. It governs authority and tradition, state institutions, legal systems, borders. It's the bureaucratic process as a function of government. It governs the taxation system, social security, civil services, cutbacks, restraints, and also ideas of fears and phobias. It's the nation's attitude to law and order, hierarchy, and traditions. It's the reactionary forces in the body politic that resist change to the establishment. And it also rules the agrarian industry and farming. It's the nation's unskilled working class.
It's very interesting how it picks up the energy of one, but it reframes it in another way. Like for instance, it's the function of the bureaucracy instead of what I think Jupiter was the Supreme Court.
The social systems and legal systems, yeah.
Yeah, but this is the whole process. Lord, okay, you're nodding. I'll go ahead. Uranus, the groundbreaker.
Yeah, it rules the populist movements that lead to social revolution and the counterculture. It's also the industrial and technological revolutions, and it represents tumultuous economical, social changes and exchange market volatility. It's involved in strikes and protests, political dissidents, and organized insurgencies. Uranus is the heavy industry that is capital intensive, like steel mining, oil refining, and industrial machinery and mass transit. And it rules information technology and the robotics industry.
as we see quite a bit. A quick question, which I know is pretty much the answer, yes, but horary really uses this framework also. Yes, I mean that's
Yeah.
how. Okay, because I have done some horary, and so people know that this is mundane and horary as a focus, because that involves. Okay, finish with.
So Neptune rules the popular collectivist movements that lead to social revolution, a nation's ideals and dreams of a perfect society as envisioned by its founders. It rules petroleum industry, also glamour and celebrity of ruling and elite and entertainment elite. It's the undercurrent of things like alcohol, tobacco, and narcotics consumption industry. It rules oceans, maritime, and shipping industries for international trade, and also national scandals, political corruption, and corporate fraud, and gross negligence. So the things that get pushed to the side.
Yeah, this one makes a lot of sense to me. And, you know, in the United States, I shouldn't take up time here, but it's the pre-eclipse that we have. It's at 0 degrees. I think it's a solar one. There's a lunar and a solar, of course, but it's 0 degrees Pisces. And that first line there, the popular collective movement for social revolution, for the dreams. I've often looked at that thinking to myself, gosh, the people coming here had so many hopes and dreams. Now, that was a pre-eclipse. It didn't happen but it was a backbone, you know, of how trying to put the peg in the hole square. We forgot Pluto.
Pluto,
Go ahead.
yeah. So Pluto rules the security state, shadow banking system, organized crime, government black budget, and classified operations, collective psycho-spiritual death rebirth process of a nation, its enemies and existential threats, and also social taboos and censorship and the controlled narrative of the state.
Truly.
So it's interesting, can I say, just
Yeah.
Pluto Neptune sextile that's ongoing and also went for 60 years through the 50s, 60s, 70s. So it's about the connection between these darker, more outer level issues that go on in society and are like an undercurrent with society's ideals and dreams that push up through the collective that cause some big shift in the general social structure.
Yes.
So something's vibrating there. And as the planets, you know, Sun, Mercury, and Venus go through that crossing point from Leo into Virgo, it's activating this sextile between the Pluto Neptune.
And it's been a long, I'm grateful for all of this. It's been a long siege, we could say. We had in 2022, the Pluto return 5 times actually over the span of 22, 23. And Neptune is in its own sign of Pisces. So besides the sextile that you're talking about with those two, this has been very powerful for us. I wanted to remember too that you had reminded me that Trump's birthday is June 14th on that conjunction.
Finals.
Yes,
Yeah.
so it's going to be potent. A brief definition of what we're talking about. Jupiter and Saturn have a 20-year conjunction cycle. It's called the Great Conjunction. It resets social and cultural ideas. And it's this contrast between growth and limits, like on a gas and brake of a car. And larger than that, they call it a grand conjunction, a 200-year cycle where every 20-year conjunction stays in the same sign, except for
in the same element.
Element. Thank you, my tongue. Yes, except for the second to the last one. Then it flips to the next one. So we've left Earth and all of them from here on out will be in Aquarius.
And air signs.
Yes. And we have just a bit here. Laura, you want to shove us off with the San Francisco fire? Because that was, of the 6 conjunctions since 1700s, this is the only one that had Mars and Jupiter and Saturn all in the same signs that they're having now.
Yes, and there's only actually been one other Jupiter Saturn square with Jupiter in Gemini and Saturn in Pisces in the last 150 years. Like it's a 60-year cycle, give or take. So in this mid 60s, we had Jupiter and Saturn in the signs they are currently. I had to go back another 60 years to find Mars part of the dynamic.
Good research.
Similar degrees too, right? Still sort of
Yes.
looking at that second decan in terms of degree. But so I found it very interesting to just, I like looking at history because there's a peeling of the onion, right? And so thematically, we might see things repeat. And one of the things that, and your slide about San Francisco, Saturn is actually the City Hall of San Francisco. But what I found interesting, because the huge earthquake in San Francisco in 1906, there was also the one in the 80s, Loma Prieta, that pancaked the Bay Bridge, but this was,
I believe it was April 18th.
yeah. And in the 80s, that was the other huge one in San Francisco. But the one in 1906 is particularly significant because what did the most damage was fire. To the city. The earthquake was huge, but then huge amounts of the city burned. But the largest part of the city that was damaged is what's now the financial district, which is all fill. And I thought that was very archetypally perfect representation of this Saturn in Pisces, where you had the bay went further into the city. North Beach in San Francisco used to be on the beach. It's now several blocks away from the coast because it was filled in. And so you get this Saturn over water of Pisces, right, is this area that was the most damaged, and how it shifted the city pretty dramatically. And it shifted how people were in the city. It moved a lot of people out of San Francisco into the East Bay. So it shifted commerce in some ways. It shifted where communities were living, which is part of that Gemini energy. And so just seeing, what we talk about, how we think there was such a large, and still is in that part of the city, an international part of the city. And so part of that Gemini multilingual part of the city being so impacted by that event. And so what is the language we use, the inclusivity of the shifting that's happening, that Jupiter is that big picture. And so what's the big story, and who's getting to talk, and even what languages are we, in a broad, like a multilingual approach to transition and transformation. And that could be multicultural too, right? And so we're seeing that with what does it mean to be biracial, right? That's being part of the conversation, and how one identifies. Right. And so that being potentially a much larger conversation than just the election in the States. Yeah.
And Norman, thank you. I love that focus of who's talking and the many voices of culture. And I think, Norma Jean, you had a couple of thoughts too, and then we're going to sign off.
Visually, the opposition between Neptune and Uranus at the midheaven are very illustrative of being trapped. All the other planets are contained in that opposition. So that's a very obvious bowl type of chart. And we also could see that Pluto is about just under 15, just maybe 16 degrees between Pluto and Neptune. So this was still part of their opening separation from their conjunction. And a lot of change in the country and, just in general in the world. This was beginning of industrial complex, industry.
I think there were, you had mentioned 5,000 people that were displaced,
50.
that were homeless.
50,000.
Enormous, enormous. Well,
Yeah.
Looking at history does have seed points, and rather, just to let our audience know, I think it's been said, but just in recap, it's really the question of realizing that there's abundant change, and in change there's a mixing, there's new opportunities, there's new areas to move to. It's not an easy change always, but there is movement. We're going to be back. Keep with us. This is Planet Buzz with activating regulated growth. That's the goal here with Dr. Tad and Norma Jean Green and myself. Be right back. Thanks.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the Yang period of Leo, ruled by the solar sun. Having departed from a cycle based on the internal process of emotional attachments requiring security and safety, the energy of Leo externally manifests our legacy through children and artistic creations. As a fixed Yang fire sign that desires to ignite actualization, Leo the lion takes the risk to generously exhibit love and welcome all to share their stage with joyous pleasure for living life.
This is Martha Norwalk. Every Sunday morning, beginning at 9 a.m., thanks in part to the Ananda Institute of Living Yoga, we cover the world of animals. This week, August 18th, it's Behavior Training and Healing Sunday with me, and talk with your human or animal loved ones on this side or the other, personal awareness coaching, and intuitive readings with Natasha Venter. Hope you can join us and plan to call in with your questions for either one of us or a personal reading with Natasha. Martha Norwalk's Animal World, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Talk Cosmos brings insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for the soul growth with hour-long programs every Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific on KKNW. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel and Facebook page. While you're there, make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons so you get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. And to find out about upcoming programs, sign up for the newsletter at talkcosmos.com. So grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
Seattle, Tacoma, Antwerp. That's right. We're streamed worldwide on our app and on the web at 1150kknw.com.
Yay! All right. We are back again, and we're going to look at the Grand Conjunction that was at December 21st, 2020. It was at 0 degrees, 29, almost half a degree, Aquarius. And it began that 200-year cycle of air. It's not easy to go from the ground of material of Earth to air. I think there's a quote there that you were saying the air rises and that Earth forms. It forms. And generally, if it rains, of course, it gets into Earth, or if there's a windstorm, it blows Earth everywhere. But still, it's a dynamic. Elements matter in this world. And here we have it. We went, this was pre-COVID, of course, just before that, as far as a social. And again, it's a bowl.
No, it was COVID. We were in COVID in December 2020.
This is the
the middle of it. That's right. Mm-hmm. And it's tighter. It's more like a fan.
That was right before. The Pluto Saturn conjunction was right before, in January 2020.
Yes.
And then there were 3 Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Yes, one was the 10th, and the other was the 12th of January. Yeah.
But yeah, so this conjunction, well, we in air, right? I do
Maybe we
think
go
that
ahead.
there's some links to this, this first square, this opening square, in because there's an elemental, in addition to that being a square, we have an elemental repeated theme, right? So air, Jupiter being an air for that, the square
Oh,
to
yes.
Saturn,
Yeah.
right? And so again, this ideas and what's being communicated and who's talking and who gets to talk, who's given the space to talk, because Saturn can restrict who's speaking, right? And so
Or what they say.
or what they say or who's allowed, who's heard, right? And so I think that that's
Yeah,
part of this.
Very important, because Jupiter needs to express, unlike Gemini, that they both need to express, but for different reasons. They have a voice, they need to express it. Any other comments? Should we jump ahead?
I'd like to point out some other things. We will compare it to this square chart, but we have the big obvious T square with the nodes square to Neptune at 18 Pisces.
Oh, yeah.
The nodes also, the north node is 19 Gemini.
Okay. Interesting. So, that's right. Which is another signature, another activation point right now.
Especially at a large collective level.
Yes, indeed.
So it is part of the theme, and we get to see it blossom with this Jupiter-Saturn square.
And back to communication and rebuilding our beliefs. I remember that was a huge repeating idea of that time, trying to interpret everything that was happening, was that people were able to, needing to reframe their beliefs. Of course, I think we became more polarized in a sense. And of course, Zoom picked up after that. Well, there are 3 of these opening squares. The first one will be on the 19th, which is going to be just 5 days after, as we had mentioned about that conjunction with Mars and Jupiter. And it's at 17 degrees Gemini and 17 degrees Pisces. And in the East Coast, it'll be at 5:46 p.m. You can figure out your times. And in London, it'll be, which is British Standard Time right now, in the evening at 10:46 p.m. This chart is only for people to recognize what the glyphs are. If you're confused, it gives a whole rundown. And the ones in blue are the prominent standard. Well, they're not all Ptolemaic, but they're the ones that we go by, the 10 planets, the luminaries and the planets. So let's get to the meat of the heart. Actually, before this, I'm going to jump ahead because we're going to do those 2. Oh boy, we do have a lot. We're going to have a lot. You're right. Okay, we'll go with it. The National Convention, which is on the same day as this square exacts, is going to be 8 hours different. And we have it for Chicago. So we're going to do bi-wheels also, but the arrows show where the actual planets are located. And there are good 2 T-squares right off the bat.
And it'll still be going on, I'm assuming. Like these conventions, it's the first day of several days, and it's usually all day long. So at 4
on into the
45 p.m., they're still going to be talking. So then we get this Jupiter conjunct the midheaven during the end of the first day of the convention. So that will probably be the last person to talk for the night, may be a really interesting lecture and a really interesting speech that's given, because that will be given under that as that perfects.
Yeah. So we have also Uranus square Mercury Sun, and it's the full moon progressing to fullness on that night. All of that is very exciting and emotional. The opposition of Venus and Saturn another factor there that it is like, the arrival of the first true possibility of having a woman president.
Mhm.
It's a big topic.
Yeah.
Indeed, absolutely. Yep. Jupiter and forceful thinking of, but this fact that it's it will be a full moon too.
And
Mhm.
with Venus on the ascendant there, it might be a woman that speaks in the evening that's a heavy hitter.
Well, and that
Right? Because that's
Venus
bringing the feminine
is,
forward in a really big way.
and it is the degree of Kamala's own Venus.
Yeah.
Oh, good. This is a bi-wheel. The inner is of the 2020 Jupiter Saturn conjunction, 21st of December. And then on the outside is this chart that we're just looking at, which will be on. Do I have the? Oh, it should be the 19th. Pardon me.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But in my little thing here, it's a night. It should have been
August 19th.
Yeah. And I've circled that Pluto is conjunct that at 0 degrees again, almost to the minute, within 14 minutes of the grand conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn back in 2020. And also this blue arrow is over here because the Pisces energies with both Neptunes transiting and natal for this chart are being aspected strongly. Natal in the 12th house of the 2020. So it's really behind secret doors, isn't it? And it is really coming out with lots of goodies.
Well,
so
if one of Pluto's jobs is to bring out the deeper truth, then we might be learning much more about the 2020 election. Because this actually, the Jupiter Saturn conjunction was just after the time where I think the 14th of December was when the Electoral College did their vote. And then January 6th was the confirmation of the vote. And so obviously this is tied in election to election.
Amazing. Laura, did you have a thought, or we'll go?
Well, just looking at all of that, the Piscean theme and the 12th house theme. And so, yes, maybe some stuff coming to light. Also, this idea of the big, that higher purpose that's Pisces, that higher octave of Venus that we talk about, particularly in EA, right? Neptune being the higher octave of Venus, so divine love, right? That idea of what's things being bigger than ourselves and bigger than an individual election as well. What's the really big, the global impact, the big picture, the long-term impact on humanity. And that being part of this story is we are on sort of that tipping point of things that will have a century impact.
Perhaps there's healing. I'm noticing here Mars is conjunct Chiron, the healer. And what takes healing is when we get away from our wounds and we realize how we can share those with other people and make it a growth process for everybody. So it's not all about me, but it's we. We shall wait and see. We have here Kamala Harris and the Democratic Convention, which is pretty powerful. Of course, we'll be going into this also next week. So I noticed that there is a Ceres return, which is fascinating. The Jupiter Squre Saturn is also potently opposite her Venus return. So she is going to be, regardless, a powerful day. I guess that'll be a week from now. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
I will be on an airplane, so we'll see what that's like.
Well, and off to Ireland, yes.
Yeah.
Uranus on her Jupiter is the biggest factor this year for her. It's her biggest ongoing transit. So that's another thing to be watching. And the full moon of this eclipse, this convention has the moon on 27 Aquarius, which is the national
It
moon.
is. Wow.
So,
Oh,
yes.
my goodness.
And on her Saturn.
Yeah.
Well, we'll hope everybody can rock and roll with the changes. Just to remind people, we have Norma Jean Ream and she's at astrologyhawaii.com, and Dr. Laura Tad is at mythicsky.com. I'm at talkcosmos.com. And in about 20 seconds, I'm going to cut it down. If we could each share what's happening. I know that you're going to have a talk that's not yet on the table, but will be.
That's right. I haven't posted a date yet, but I'm having a webinar on the election process and going into 2025. So I'll be posting more about that.
In September. It'll be in September. So people should keep their eyes open and go to your site or email you. That'd be great.
That's right.
And Laura, I know this will be their 3rd year, and
Yeah.
it's on your site because I found this and made it up for you. But it is in wonderful Nicaragua, right on the beach with little turtles and everything. But maybe in 20 seconds, you can tell people how to reach you.
So at mythicsky.com, it'll redirect you to my friend Michelle's site to register. She and I have been running this retreat together. We've done it 2 years. Well, this will be the 3rd that I've done it. She's been running retreats down there for a decade. And she's an amazing body worker and yoga teacher. She is building a retreat center down there as we speak. The yoga platform is now built. They were putting in skylights this week. So beautiful bamboo yoga platform that's enormous. That's right by the pool. The yoga platform, it's half a block from the beach. It's the beach where we hold it on Playa El Coco is by a turtle sanctuary. So at least once during the course of the week, there'll be a turtle release of letting the baby turtles release into the sea.
Wow. And just tell us too, before we go, because I want
so it's yoga and meditation and myth work. And I'll do some stuff around working with the moon because we'll be there for some important lunar cycles that this particular year. I sort of play based on what's going on in the sky, talk about that. You'll be able to see Venus. There's no light pollution there. So we'll see Venus set at night.
Oh, gorgeous. And the myth work is so important. It's really transformational. I think personally, I'm a fan of that. I would go down just to be with you. I am monthly with Liz Mouchette on her channel, and you can find it at videos featuring me on Sue Minute Rose Minahan on my YouTube channel. And we're going to be talking about the Dwarf Planet series and the moon coming up in August. And next week, I have this new panel that will be really focusing on the Democratic Convention, and it's called U.S. Global Currents. Thank you to everybody for signing up and subscribing. We appreciate it, and thank you so much. What happened? Okay, things are happening fast. Okay, so here we are, the last 2 that we can talk about, because there is a second opening Squre on Christmas Eve. And then following that will be next summer in June 15th. Everything will be in different signs. So let's begin with this for we have 7 minutes. So we can give about 3 minutes to this and maybe a little more time to the other.
Well, I think we get just quickly what jumps up to me is that we get this repeated thing with Mercury, right? So now suddenly Mercury is part of a T-square. And so this idea, again, of communication, what's being said, who's being listened to, who gets the opportunity to speak, what ideas, whose philosophies are being heard and given the weight that they deserve because of that square to Saturn, right? Are they being taken seriously? Are people being listened to? Or are people, that there may be some challenge with that of people feeling like they're being taken seriously because of that square to Saturn. That creates that T-square.
Either side, a lot of people will have not be necessarily so happy with who was elected. So we'll
put on our critical thinking caps and go into Virgo, which is the polarity point of that T-square, to break out of that questioning things and really looking at things, taking that critical Virgo eye that Virgo's so good at, to know what the truth really is.
And I will jump in here just to note that Mars is retrograde. It's in its cycle in Leo. It'll go back to Virgo too. And it's opposing Pluto. So, but it's also in this amazing conducive mystic rectangle, which is trines and sextiles. So if things flow and things connect, hopefully in a easy way, if depending on what one's working on, but it's still potently amazing.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the things to be like that idea where Mars can rush, right? So not rushing to judgment when we're trying to unpack things. Mars can be great for drive, but particularly with it retrograde, right? We have to redo with Mars retrograde. So going back over things we've already done is pretty common with Mars retrograde. And being mindful to not rush to judgment, with that being part of this one.
Norma Jean, did you have a thought here?
Well, just to plug it in a little bit with the U.S. chart, the Sibley chart has 12 Sagittarius rising. So that puts this T-square across the axis of our, open enemies or political issues. And it still sort of gives the idea that things are unsettled, that we're still trying to decide perhaps what happened with the election. This is such a short time after the election. So similar to the 2020 chart.
Well, the last chart, which we have time now to talk about, is on the 15th of June, 2025. I don't have a time, pardon me, folks, but it's the third opening Jupiter-Saturn square. However, Jupiter has recently, as of June 9th, gone into Cancer, and Saturn has ingressed to Aries, along with Neptune, meaning that's a very different cardinal square of action, more action than it was in the mutable squares that were happening, will be coming up, and in December. Along with that, in January, about the 21st or 20th, 19th, the lunar nodes shift, and they'll go into North Node Pisces and South Node Virgo.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very different sky. I think, the only thing that's in the same sign, Mars and what I just saw it,
Pluto.
So Mars,
Pluto.
no, Pluto's in Capricorn for part of it, right?
Well, not for no, Pluto's not. No, I was going to add Pluto, but it's not. Pluto goes in
I guess
September.
Pluto's very different because it's hasn't gotten to 3 yet for us. So the fact
no,
that
that's true. Yeah, it's finally moving out away from that Capricorn, but it moves as of like November 20th or 19th. It goes back into
that's the last
Aquarius.
Yeah. But so Mars and Pluto are the only 2 planets that are in the same signs,
ruling Scorpio traditionally.
And so the whole sky has changed basically.
That's right.
And we don't see that very frequently, right?
No.
That all the outer planets are shifting, and it'll be really different.
And
it'll be a different world.
I'm noticing too, Juno, of our marriages and our alliances and what we want to partner with, is in that Thor's hammer, along with Neptune that's conjunct Saturn. On the best side of this, it could be a spiritual awakening too. I mean, if things aren't working one way, you got to try another way. And maybe for more mainstream people, they will be listening to their woo-woo insights. Do you have some other comments? We can talk for about a few seconds while the music serenades us.
Yeah. It just is sort of a suggestion of the energy change before the real Saturn-Neptune conjunction that happens in February of 26.
Ah, good deal. Thank you, Dr. Tad and Norma Jean Ream. I love this. Activating regulated growth. We're doing our best, and blessings to all.
Thank you for joining an insightful conversation on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests awaken consciousness by connecting soul growth patterns with astrology's energetic cycles. Be sure to tune in next Sunday, 1 p.m. Pacific Time, to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.